Jamaica's national security has been the subject of renewed scrutiny in the past few weeks. Murders rocketing past 200 since the start of the year, a cyber vulnerability that has resulted in the exposure of thousands of records on the Jam COVID website, the lack of a clearly communicated policing strategy, and that comment by the National Security Minister, Dr. Horace Chang, about the hobbling of executive action in the crime fight. Hello, I'm Damian Mitchell, and thank you for joining us for this special Gleaner Editors Forum, The Crime Crisis 3. Today, Jamaica's Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of National Security, Dr. Horace Chang. We are expected to be joined in a short while also by the Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of National Security, Matthew Samuda. But let me begin with allowing you, Dr. Chang, 2 minutes for your opening and your general comments in respect of national security issues in Jamaica at present.
Thank you very much, Damon, and thank you to all those who are listening in. I would say it's a pleasure. It's good to be there this morning to discuss what is a vital topic to the country's welfare and development. This government made national security a priority from day one because we view the country cannot grow unless it's on a foundation of public safety and good order and anti-corruption in every way. But that's the base on which we're looking at the entire security architecture. In terms of your approach to crime crisis, it is, but I don't use the language crisis at this point. We have an extremely challenging situation, and it's not rocketing to 200 has been almost a standard for the last 20 years. I have one of your headlines from 1972, which almost exact words. And I recall my own activities back when I entered Montego Bay in 2005, and that kind of activity was there. I mean, not in any way justified. We are nowhere near where we should be, but it's just to emphasize we're going through a very difficult time for some time. And the government is recognized this as taking certain steps to try and to seek to correct the problem. We are, in fact, as of today, 4.3% ahead of last year. We have been between January 1 and February 22, some days we went as high as 10% ahead, we fell equal and we fell below. And that's how the murder rate is going, which is the most challenging part of the crime picture, and of course the most damaging part, personally. One of the challenges that we have faced this year, which we should note before I go further, is that the character of the homicides have been horrible. They have been brutal and, literally shakes the public confidence and their image of safety. The survey and crime victimization show that 97% of Jamaicans felt safe in churches and 92% in their home. And the last was, where a brutal murder took place in a church. And that really, hit the society and hit, all of us personally in a very difficult way. I knew the lady very well. That has been part of it. In addition to that, we have seen some more. And I have to get the statistics, and I've actually asked my security team to examine them. But certainly the last 6 months, we have seen an increased level of interfamily and interpersonal conflict resulting in violence. We have seen far more people being hired to kill someone. So the use of the professional gunman, plus the stabbing, the choppings, and that, which has created a greater sense of fear, although the numbers are the same. And that's the area we have to examine how we approach that.
We'll come back to some of these issues in the discussion, Dr. Chang, but let me allow then the Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of National Security, Matthew Samuda, for his opening 2-minute comments. Mr. Samuda?
Just join us. All right, he's trying to get in now. I just think he just completes the task.
I think he is on. I think he's on. I'm not sure why we're not
hearing
all.
from. I didn't
very well.
I didn't realize that was the format, but sure, I'll see what I can.
Yeah, you're busy when it came in. You have a half an hour of live streaming right now, Minister.
Sure.
You give a 2-minute opening, and we have discussions after.
Sure. So I think it is well known that the country's national security is the priority of this administration. It is a commitment of this government that we will do all in our power to improve the capacity of the security architecture to deliver against these results. It's the policy and the focus of the government to deal with age-old issues despite frontally and openly, despite how uncomfortable they are to face at some times. And we continue to look at security as a as an issue that requires a holistic solution. Plan Secure Jamaica is the most developed, most integrated plan to address some of the social ills that are triggers for crime in Jamaica's history, certainly that I've read. The issues that fall specifically within my ministerial assignment are significant. The issues around DCS in particular are well known and well documented. I believe we have the plans and programs in place to deal with them over time, but we will welcome questions as they come and address them as best as possible within what we're able to discuss.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Senator Samuda. First up, let's try to get this.
Before we get the question going, we'll have Mr. Samuda come back on the question of the breach in the Jam COVID site because he handled it directly on my behalf.
Well, in fact, that's exactly what we want to, where we want to start. We want to just get that out the way because there have been several concerns being expressed in relation to what is being regarded as a vulnerability. So let me ask, though, Mr. Samuda, what's that prima facie case that could have led the government to ordering a criminal probe into this Jam COVID saga?
So I think you accept that where there are allegations, regardless of how they're posted, how they're brought to your attention, it would be the expectation of the public, and reasonably so, that anything that would come to my desk or Dr. Chang's desk would be referred to the relevant authorities. There is a lot floating around in certainly the social media space, and even now in traditional media, in comments, in open discussion, that would not be within my capacity to pass judgment on. As such, the information reaching to my desk from the initial reports and even beyond that demanded that we refer it to all of the relevant authorities, not just criminal, but all of the relevant state authorities to determine what indeed has happened. I think the country deserves a thorough assessment, a thorough investigation of the state of play, what would have been the case, what wouldn't have been the case. That has to take its course. If there are indeed if there is indeed no one culpable, then no charges will be laid. If there are concerns of the security forces, then we deal with those as they come. But I think it would only be reasonable that an allegation of a breach of the Cybercrimes Act, you would expect that it would be passed to the relevant authorities. I think any attempt not to do so would result in another call, which should be, why didn't I refer the matter?
Yes.
So,
well, let me ask you this question then, though, Mr. Samuda. Will you deny that a recommendation was made earlier this year for the Jam COVID site to be turned over to eGov for management?
No, I won't get into the weeds, because at the end of the day, at this stage, we're not at that place where I can tell you what was recommended from start to finish, what were the security assessments. I think you have to give the time for that investigation. If it's found, for instance, that any of the actions that were to have been taken weren't taken in a timely fashion, then accountability will fall wherever it needs to fall. That's the openness and the commitment of the government. If we are negligent, if there's some sort of issue, then we will stand up to it. But I think it is way too early, while there are several assessments going on and full investigations going on, to determine what is the state of play. And because those assessments are going on, I don't know that you could expect me to go much into it at this juncture.
Well,
what you could say, Minister Damien, you could say before you get to the question is that breaches happen in the basic systems, but clearly it will impact on us significantly. A small country, and we are moving more aggressively into the cyber age. And when you deal with personal data, that's protection of personal data is critical to confidence in the government.
Except though, Dr. Chang, that this is not being regarded as a breach, but as a vulnerability, as has been reported.
I'm saying a vulnerability, which we
because the argument is that no one cracked any password to get into the site. It was there for all to see.
I'm about to say the critical element is to ensure that we have continuous assessment of the vulnerabilities, and what has come here, the government will ensure that all the sites are checked out for vulnerabilities, which have been an ongoing process, but we'll see how how that went, but we will ensure all our current sites are checked. We have the capacity to do that over the next few hours, and it will be done. And that's
so it has started already, though?
Yes, it has started.
And, do you know if there will be any change in the management of the website, or if that is a consideration?
No, we take steps to correct it, and if there needs to be a change in management, it will be done. And I said, ultimately, eGov takes charge of government sites largely, so that those movements that you hinted at could be taking place, but
I'm
sorry, I'm losing Dr. Chang.
So while the internet comes back in, Damien, just to be clear, there are a whole wide range of activities taking place to examine the issues, fix the ones that you discover, and go through the process to give the country a fair report. And whatever the report says, it will be made public. Whatever it leads us to in terms of actions, those actions will be taken. But to prematurely determine what those are and what they need to be, would be not a reasonable position. However, we are taking a number of steps, and I expect that within the coming days, we'll be in a better place to give a full update.
Well, I think I'm back on, but they're not right. I think
he's back with
yes, Dr. Chang, you're back. Yes, thank you for that. I want to ask you a question, though, Dr. Chang.
We're the public. We're taking steps to ensure that data protection is critical as we go forward, because more and more we're going to cyberspace. COVID has had a devastating impact on the economy, but it's also forced us to move rapidly into digitization and cyberspace, which is the way forward and the way of the future of any successful economy.
We have some other questions we want to put at you, but this final one on this matter of the COVID vulnerability or the COVID site vulnerability, has this not shot the confidence in the security of the NIDS platform that the government is now embarking on?
No, it would not. We bear in mind, I said, none of the critical government, any other critical assorted government points were affected. For example, PICA, which is what you compare to NIDS, they did not find any vulnerability there. And we monitor PICA regularly, and that has not been challenged or impaired in any way, and there were no vulnerabilities cited there. And we are having our teams re-examine it again, just make sure there's none there. And we have the capacity to do so, and we look at all the sensitive areas. Remember, COVID came in at a time when we were facing a crisis in terms of the emergence of the pandemic. We needed a travel portal that could, travel authorization portal, and we moved quickly. In fact, we got a lot of commendation for being one of the first countries to introduce with some kind of with logic, and that it worked well. But that is no excuse for the vulnerabilities being there. I would say so. But it's different from the other sites, and as I said, the established sites that we have that carry critical data have not shown those vulnerabilities, and we will ensure that we maintain them in that order, right? And
very well. Let me turn then, Dr. Chang. Last week, the Governor General indicated that this year there will be several legislative changes to improve national security. What are your top 3 legislative priorities?
We have 4 items that we're going to take through. We intend to get at least out of the drafting stage into LegCom to take to Parliament in the first quarter of this year, calendar year, and which is the end of the financial year. That they will come into the House, of course, in the first quarter of the financial year, but we'll get them out of the system. Getting legislation done is a tedious process, and it's not totally under control of the ministry, but I'm paying personal attention to it, and I've gotten the priorities right. And the 4 pieces we're looking at, number 1 is the Firearms Act. 80% of our homicides are committed with guns, and the Firearms Act is old and not particularly relevant to the current time, nor does it carry the kind of weight it should have. And then without going into detail, I give you a typical example. Up until recently, if you didn't license your firearm on your birthday, it means you had an illegal firearm. And there was no difference between an unlicensed firearm and a legal firearm. So you were the same as a man who was brought in an AK-47 and 45 to go and kill people. That will be changed in the new law. And that's our number one piece of legislation, which we expect to bring in the House early this year. We have, of course, the review of the anti-gang legislation, which you're aware of we did in the House recently, and now putting that into law. And therefore, the lawyers have to go through that between the Parliamentary Council, Attorney General Department, and of course, our policy unit and the Ministry of Justice. And we have been able to pull the team together very effectively since about October to really focus on them in the new term of office. Literally, pull them together and focus on security, and it's going well. The next piece is less dramatic but very important, as it has to do with border security, and we need to have a robust legislation governing that, which is the Aliens Act and the Immigration Restricting Commonwealth Citizens Act. And there's some new thoughts being brought to it, both for security and for economic reasons. And those three pieces are the three legislation we intend to bring very quickly to the House. In fact, I said certainly during the first quarter of the next financial year, and so the legislation drafting and should be finished in this quarter. The other piece of legislative work, but not legislation, is the investigation and prosecuting authority regulations for MOCA, which has taken some time, I accept, but from the very beginning, when MOCA was being established, a consultant was acquired from an employee of the CPC. And in fact, they're being paid for by one of our partners. I didn't interfere. They're quite competent, but it has taken a very long time to get the process through. We follow it on a daily basis. One of the challenges, of course, with this MOCA is that it's an independent body. It doesn't come under the JCF Act, and we have to give it the powers of the JCF, literally powers of the constabulary, without having it under the JCF Act. So the lawyer kept telling me it will take a lot of legal footwork to do it, but it's there now, and we should have that breaks.
Very well. I think Liveran Barrett is indicating that he has a question. Liveran, go ahead.
Mr. Barrett, how are you, sir?
Morning, Minister Chang and Minister Samuda. How are you?
You're looking very relaxed here in that office, man. You're safe and healthy.
I appreciate it. Minister, I just wanted to find out, what are some of the things that you want to criminalize in the new Firearms Act? If you could give us a couple of the things that you want to.
I don't want to top my head, but things like I said, how we differentiate between unlicensed and illegal firearm. The question of things like trading in firearm was not illegal or not a criminal act in Jamaica. Smuggling firearm was not criminal. And there are quite a number of things associated with that kind of activity was not, which are criminal activity that need to be criminalized. But the Firearms Act was brought in to really accommodate a legal framework for the Jamaica Rifle Association, literally, legal firearms. There was very little emphasis placed on illegitimate activity, manufacturing of ammunition. In fact, I don't think there's anything in the law that deals with manufacturing of a firearm in the current legislation. So those are things that were brought into the system, the smuggling, the trading, the manufacturing modifications, and paraphernalia to go with that.
Well, that matter of the illegal importation was one that the former Commissioner Owen Ellington raised on this platform about 2 weeks ago. You're saying now that there will be on the book specific laws regarding the importation of firearms.
Yeah. But they have had significant success with the big imports there. Unfortunately, because of the structural law, they are being prosecuted more in our partner state than here, although their law dealing with illegal trading is different from their right to bear arms. And of the 7 shipments we have had, certainly the first one, the gentleman is in jail for that first batch of 19 about 2 years ago. The second one, the person is on trial, and that was a very dangerous one, which was shipping some guns through the port here, I think about 19 or 20, to a gang in Jamaica. He's in jail. A third gang leader is also, I think, recently arrested. And the other 3 shipments are people we have our eyes on. We have a pretty fix on them, and we should close those cases in the course of this year.
But Minister, the second limb of my question, we have given the police the anti-gang legislation, and we have used ZOZO and the SOEs as part of the crime-fighting capability.
Strategy.
strategy.
program.
Right. Now we're proposing a new Firearms Act to widen the list of offenses that citizens can be prosecuted for.
No, criminals.
After 4 years in operation, we've only had convictions under the anti-gang legislation in 2 cases, the Uchens, and there was one before where the fellow pleaded guilty. Are you satisfied with the returns from the security forces, particularly the police, from the new crime-fighting tools that they've been given?
All right, you name a number of 2, but let's take anti-gang, because that was an important piece of legislation which came on stream. The police has done excellent work on anti-gang, but any new law coming into place has to go through the courts to establish the precedents and the collaboration between the police and the prosecutors to ensure we get this kind of thing successfully through the courts. So we have the hitches on the way. Plus, you have to bear in mind that in Jamaica, well, before I even get to that point, you'll find that the earlier tendency as the law came on stream and there was lack of familiarity was to prosecute individuals on what you call the predicate offenses. So if you have a man who you catch with a firearm or you know he's a killer and you're able to get eyewitness evidence rather than go to the process waiting to get the whole gang, they take them in, charge them because they're sure to get a conviction when they have a witness they have confidence in and they find, especially if they find the firearm and tie it directly to the person. So, they will get their minimum 10 years. The judge's history shows they'll get a good sentencing for that kind of activity. So there was the tendency to go with what you can do, what you're familiar with, and what you get done quickly. The gang investigation take a long time. So there's 4 years. In fact, the youth investigation was a 3-year investigation, which came on stream after legislation. The other one that got messed up, the Burger Gully one, that was a couple of years. And their gangs being investigated from I came in the ministry and still under investigation and not yet arrested. And we have a couple of the trials coming up, which have been ongoing. So the timing is not great, but the success rate, this was concerning. But without giving extra part of us to get the prosecutors, and the arresting people to work together and then to go to court and of course have the requisite evidence. But the bar for criminal evidence in Jamaica is particularly high. A lot of it depends on first person affidavit, and in gang killings in Jamaica, that's almost impossible to get. Nobody turn up as a live witness for a gang because they tend to get killed afterwards, and that's a challenge. If you notice, I think in almost all the cases we have had, it's a gang member who has turned. In one case, coming up and a gangster said they killed all his family members because of the rule of the gang. So he has turned now, although he has been convicted. So it has been challenging, but I'm not discouraged. I say a lot of work has been done. There's much more knowledge of the gangs, how they operate, and therefore there are changing strategic efforts in terms of how we use the technology we are putting in the system now to acquire evidence that is worthy of going to courts.
I have to interrupt you, Dr. Chang, because time is fast leaving us, and there are a few other issues we need to look at, including the prison system with Senator Samuda. But 2 weeks ago, former Police Commissioner Owen Ellington said there was, I beg your pardon, 2 weeks ago, former Police Commissioner Owen Ellington, as well as former Commissioner Rear Admiral Hada Lewin, was on this platform, and they were flabbergasted that there seems to be no clearly communicated policing strategy. Do you know what the strategy is?
I'm not sure what they mean by policing strategy or what they want. As I said, we laid out a national plan, which I've outlined before. I'm not sure that deals with the entire security issues. They come across six platforms which deal with improving the country's security architecture, police, army, etc. in terms of the physical side. We deal with the justice system. And they've all had the detailed plans worked out and budget beside them for the year. Youth and community development, and of course, borders and border security, the anti-corruption system, which is easy to identify, the bringing on stream of MOCA, Integrity Commission, and legislation behind it, along with, of course, after getting all that done, to improve our trust with the wider public, which is a challenge that we have to work with. The police, of course, in improving their physical approach, have to operate on several strategic fronts on which to operate. There is, of course, the public order issue, which is one operation. The PSTB was introduced. We have not been able to manage fully because we are short 3,000 policemen, which we are expanding and increasing our training facility.
Worsened by COVID?
It was damaged by COVID because we had to reduce the numbers to maintain social distancing and all the other factors required. But we did get to 680, and we expect to increase that this year because we acquired new facilities in Tranquility Bay and did critical capital works at the school. So we'll be increasing our recruitment. But the PSTB was a new direction for public order. Clearly defined, we're getting the traffic act, the traffic regulation should come in force this year. We have been working with the Ministry of Transport. It should be on fast, and we can then begin to electronic ticketing. That's public order. We changed the mobile reserve into the special ops team to look at how we can have specially trained and SWAT teams to focus on gangs in conjunction with CTOC. So the intelligence operation have been changed. I want the details there. We have a much more robust intelligence operation, and now the special ops teams, which have been trained, you don't hear them getting into the kind of thing that mobile reserve was, but they are as effective, and they have in fact apprehended many major killers in their operation.
Quickly, Doc, is there a target that the government through the police is looking at in respect of a reduction of homicides?
Yeah, but initially, clearly we have targets. And before I give the targets, as I said, outlining, we took a holistic look at security because we have had this problem, and I don't use the term crisis, for some 20 years solid. We have not been able to do 1,000 murders. We have dropped near 1,000, and we have had significant drops only on 2 occasions. Despite of the open debate, the fact is that you had a legacy of after the 2010 state of emergency in the police action in West Kingston, near 100 citizens were killed, and criminals were scared, and you end up with a 2-year dip, and then it started going up again and peaked to us in 2017. After the 2017 state of emergency, we had a 22-23% drop, and again, it has been pretty level since then. Our target is to keep this not only level, but get it going down. It means doing all the things we have referred to, because acute response is not enough. The acute response gives us a sudden drop, but we need sustainable reduction. And that has been a debate going on, and we think all the things we're doing will do so. In terms of the long-term view, the experts suggest, given the size of Jamaica, the number of gangs we have, you will not get a clear, well, not an easy path, but a more sustainable path until you get to about 800, because most of the homicides in the gang is retaliatory. Now, when you have 200 gangs and sometime in the urban center, little gangs scattered all over, and they retaliate, you will always have some level of, you get shootings. Now, when you have so many, it is almost impossible to build a police force that can investigate and clear up 1,400 murders in any one time. If you look at a international best practice, you take the UK, with nearly 100 million people, there are 33 gun killings in the UK, in all the United Kingdom. So when they get a killing, they assign 10, 15 police officers. And in Jamaica, you assign 10 murders to 1 police officer. But they've been doing pretty well. We are really over 50% clear up rate. We're about standard 50% now.
So am I hearing you're saying that 800 is your target, and what time frame are you
it's below that. But
below 800?
Yeah, but
and you're
800
looking...
is a target you go for to get sustainable reduction over time with
And what's your
normal
time
policing.
frame to attain that?
The time frame I'm looking at is more in when I will complete the investment the security force I require, which is I need to recruit. I need to recruit the additional at least 2,000 of the 3,000 I need the police force. I need to complete give them the kind of ecosystem to operate, which is efficient in terms of the physical communication, cyber, all that is required, surveillance, the forensic capacity to get evidence even beyond what we have to demand by a first person affidavit. And that's a whole new approach. Nobody have even tried to do that for them. And then we, having put all that together to ensure our legislative framework is in place. So, there's things we'll have to do that may even have to have some additional special legislation with sunset clauses, because, in Jamaica is small. We know the gangs, the personnel, and if you're to treat it like public health, you would succeed very quickly. But we cannot treat it like public health, as some people have said. Public health, if you suspect a man is COVID positive, you detain him. you quarantine him, you restrict his movement, and you restrict the movement of those around him. So you get control of the spread of COVID-19. We know the criminal, you know what he does, but you cannot detain him. You cannot control the movement of the people around him, and you cannot restrict the movement of the gang members around him. So we have to go the legitimate police routing, and we need some more legislation to assist us, and we put them in place. And
Well, thank you very much for that,
the
Dr.
tools to
Chang.
do the job.
Thank you very much for that, but we have to go to prison with Senator Matthew Samuda now. I maintain, Senator Samuda, that...
I think he has a room there for you.
Well, I often tell my friends that I've been to prison many times, I've just never slept there.
Well, careful, Mr. Samuda,
I maintain, Mr. Samuda, that the greatest failure of successive governments is a structure of reintegration and rehabilitation. And I think that to a great extent, the reoffending rate of 56% in the past 5 years is tied to this. What are your short, medium, and long-term plans for a structured system of rehabilitation and reintegration in the prisons?
The recidivism rate is actually a little below 50%, Damien, just for clarity and for correction.
This is DCS data I'm quoting for the past 5 years.
I hear you, Damien. I'm just telling you that I have the facts in front of me as well. It is a little under 50% as it stands now. However, the facts remain. The Department of Correctional Services has suffered from just under 6 decades of underinvestment. When you go through the national security presentations through the Parliament's Hansard over the decades, no government has made the sorts of investments in the varying aspects of the process of managing those in custody. The infrastructure is what jumps out at people most because it's the most visible, and it's, in obviously a dilapidated state. But the facts remain that there are a number of factors that go into this reoffending rate. The fact that we have one of the lowest incarcerated populations per capita, the fact that sentencing in Jamaica and we don't have many guidelines in terms of how long people spend for particular crimes when you compare it to other territories within our space, so persons are getting out even before they would in other territories. The fact that you have limited resources to drive the process of not just reintegration, but resocialization. You're not going to have somebody in custody for 3 years who would have been socialized a particular way for sometimes over 20, sometimes over 30 years, and expect that in 3 years, you're going to make all the changes that you need in a system that is under-resourced and has significant challenges. It's just not going to happen.
And so the short, medium, and long-term plan?
Well, I think in my most recent statement to the Parliament, we'd have articulated a particular strategy, especially as it relates to infrastructure. The first strategy is to look at what has worked for us with the rehabilitation program for police stations under our Project Rock, and to do a full engineering assessment of what is workable and what is not, what is the true state of the infrastructure, what is the potential risks, and what is really required to bring that into some semblance of modernity in a way that is transparent and that all persons can understand what is the approach to bringing the projects to life. One of the things that I think Dr. Chang has spoken about in the past is that, as we know, the Ministry of Finance allocates resources to agencies and to areas of government that have the proven capacity to execute the projects and to bring the projects from paper to reality. So we're in the process of getting several projects shovel-ready, not least of all a forensic ward for the mentally ill, a prison infirmary, new blocks in particular facilities. We have a project being designed now for sanitation. And of course, we're going through the process in partnership with DBJ to determine the modality for financing of a new facility. We also have several programs that I think are some known, some not so known in terms of the rehabilitation program. We have upsized the education program for our juveniles. The We Transform program is an excellent program that connects mentors to these young people to bring down that recidivism rate. That program has suffered badly because of COVID, because of the inability to facilitate visitation. Even though we've done our best to connect them digitally, there's still a skepticism and an unwillingness by many people, by many inmates or wards to connect via this medium. We're looking at our education program in collaboration with the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information. There are a number of things taking place, Damian, and we can go into them on an individual basis because they all come together to provide a better security result.
Very well. I think Janet Silvera has indicated she has a question. Janet, go ahead.
My question is related to the prison system and how we are going to ensure that prisoners who go into these facilities are not partying and having access to so much. It's as if they're on the streets just the same. They're in prison, but they're not deterred from going again, owing to the fact that it doesn't feel like prison. What it is, what plans you have to ensure that they feel as if they're in a prison?
So that answer is multi-layered, Janet, because you have a number of changes that have to be made to bring that about. The first thing is that our legislation is archaic and a colonial relic, and we have to change that and bring that to the Parliament very soon. We will, however, be making the legislative changes on a phased basis to ensure that we're able to bring about the security outcomes that you ask about. The first change will be to Section 213 and 80 of the Corrections Act that will criminalize the act of bringing in contraband into our facilities. The facts are the ability to hold correctional officers accountable for that act is very hazy and very difficult within the current legal framework. Additionally, we'll be bringing in the technology necessary to ensure that your points of entry are monitored in a particular way, and they will not be monitored on site, but there will be adequate adequate connectivity rather with the facilities and the monitoring center. Beyond that, though, there will have to be significantly more training, and we'll have to do a significantly better job in terms of vetting our members as we approach the situation. Now, we've done in the last couple of months, since I think the issues would have become public and I think become, a source of discontent within the society, and rightfully so. We've done what I call throwing bodies at the problem. We've had to use many trainees and use many members of staff from other facilities to assist with searches at the entrance of facilities. We've conducted several dozen security operations and mass searches. And these operations have largely worked. But the truth is, as we know, those things are short-term fixes and not sustainable as you throw bodies at the problem. We will continue to throw bodies at the problem until legislation is passed, which I expect to be early in the new fiscal year, not beyond May, as the drafting is done. We're just where we are in the parliamentary cycle, so it just needs to go to LegCom and get approved. The technology is already under procurement through an IDB-funded program within the ministry. I think it's dubbed the Security Strengthening Project. And we've had already significant consultations both with our unions and with those responsible for training our correctional officers. It's also been made very clear to the management of DCS that this is a priority to bring about the security outcomes that will allow for the process of rehabilitation to take root.
Sorry, Doc, Mr. Samuda, can you one step before we come back to you, Mr. Chang? I just wanted Mr. Samuda, one sec, Dr. Chang. I just wanted Mr. Samuda to expand a bit on that technology. What is that technology you're looking at, which will be monitored offsite?
Well, it's multi-layered. It's scanners, it's cameras, it's metal detectors. It's technology you would know of and some that we wouldn't discuss, but it's in line with best practices to monitor the entry points and the borders and within the facilities to ensure that we have a proper picture and proper management controls within our facilities. The system, we will also, and it's under procurement, and it would have been advertised even in your newspapers. I'm not sure if it's closed yet, but we'll also be bringing to bear a modern jail management system, as it's dubbed by the IDB. But this will bring about the sorts of management interfaces that are critical. You're using a paper-based system with records that are dozens of years old, and you're just not going to get the sort of management results that you want. The first thing that came on my desk when I had the privilege to join Dr. Chang here was the purchase of 2 containers for paper-based records. That's a bad omen, and it wasn't a good first day to see that on the desk as something that was about to start. Now, we have to maintain those records as per the laws as they're kept in a particular form. So if the court sends to the file, you're able to to provide it. But no modern organization, national security or otherwise, can function without managers having data at the tips of their fingertips to be able to make decisions and to advise us to make particular policy decisions. And that doesn't exist now. But we are in the process of getting such a system. The necessary networking and other components to bring the plan together in a synergistic manner are underway.
Well, speaking of containers, can you say what action will be taken in relation to the millions of dollars worth of uniforms for correctional officers, which reportedly cannot be distributed because they were not approved?
So my understanding of that matter is that internal audit is looking into it, and I think very soon we'll be able to advise the country what is the state of that. What I do know is that the issue of uniforms has been a particularly uncomfortable issue, it seems, going back several administrations, and the unions are not happy. So we have to look at and bring to an end in terms of how it's being handled. And very soon I'll update the country in terms of changes to that system. But that has to come through the usual consultation process with the Ministry of Finance and with our union, because the system as it is now is going to lend itself to challenges, and it's too mundane of a topic to when we have other serious things to deal with within DCS to get caught up in these sorts of issues. But as soon as the internal audit issues are resolved, we will make the country aware of that.
Well, we have 4 minutes left, and I want to bring back Dr. Chang in the discussion. I want to draw your attention, Dr. Chang, to these words you uttered in the Parliament earlier this month. Quote, "A democratically elected government cannot be vetoed in carrying out executive action in the face of a crisis and should not be in a democratic society. It is inappropriate to block executive attempt in the interest of the people," end quote. Is this in any way a criticism of the court, which has ruled against the prolonged use of the states of public emergency to detain Jamaicans?
I don't direct at the court specifically, but before you move on, I said, we have given Minister Samuda responsible for the prisons the short sentencing, and it doesn't allow for the kind of work that you expect to get reform in. And every country which has had serious outbreaks of violence have shown a tendency, has had success, have longer sentences than it happening, say, somewhere like Honduras. But you have asked me a specific question. I don't direct it at the court specifically. This current structure of the need to declare a state of emergency requires the approval of the opposition. And that was introduced by a government led by the Jamaica Labour Party. But I think looking at the legislation, it's not appropriate, because the executive, once you have a democratic society, you'll be subject to accountability in election. If you fail dramatically, you of course fail in the electoral system, and we have a lot of confidence in the electoral process. And where the elected government sees the need for that kind of activity, I think it should be allowed to proceed. And that's where I'm going. Of course, the court's opinion in this case is subject to other opinion, which will be going to the appeal court, because the court who ruled on the constitutional nature of the state of emergency was not in his remit. He has a right to do so as a judge, but the Supreme Court is this full court in that ought to rule on the constitutionality of something like the.
But won't your parliamentary majority at present help a lot, though, Dr. Chang?
There's still a place called the Senate, Damien.
Yes.
You have to still go to the Senate. We have a constitution done very well by our leaders, or the country's forefathers, and you ensure that you still have to have 2/3 majority in the Senate, which is fine. But I'm just saying there are certain things when you may limit the time which you have it for, you may limit the regulations by law, but you do have a situation where a country does move 14 days.
We're into our final minute, and there are 2 issues to take. How do you assess the zones of special operations, Dr. Chang, in relation to the model on which it was sold? Clear, hold, build.
Up to now, they are working well. If you look at this thing of Clear, we look at say, for example, the homicide rate has dropped dramatically in all 3 of them. In fact, they have been 0 for several weeks in 3 out of the 4. The whole situation, therefore, is ongoing, and the building has started in all of them. But it's a very expensive process, and we have a significant number of committees which to apply, and we have to be careful we don't take a good project and oversell it, or should I say, if we don't provide the required budget, then you undermine the credibility of the program. And that has, in fact, delayed expansion from the number of years we're in. But it works very well. And I think it's in terms of a strategy or philosophy of law enforcement, it's the only one that makes sense in us over the years. I think it's the best we have seen over the years, because the fact is, unless we deal with the socioeconomic situation in these communities, we'll never have long-term reduction in crime, because these communities provide the kind of nest for the development of criminal activity.
You're almost preempting me, Dr. Chang, but let me finally ask you to complete the sentence as we draw to a close this segment of our Editors Forum. Complete the sentence, Dr. Chang, and then Senator Samuda after. For Plan Secure Jamaica to work, we must?
Well, we must not only bring our security force in the 21st century, we must do that, but we must also deal effectively with the communities which are affected across Jamaica. We have identified them a long time. I think from 2009, we have to invest in our people.
Senator Samuda, for Plan Secure Jamaica to work, we must?
For Plan Secure Jamaica to work, we must get all components of the plan to be put in place in the appropriate timeframes so that the results can be assessed appropriately and that adjustments can be made in a timely fashion when there are adjustments needed, as all plans from time to time require. For Plan Secure Jamaica to work, we have to diagnose the problem in an accurate fashion, explain it to the public, bring them along the journey so that we're able to implement the things that require national support for us to do.
Well, thank you so very much, Senator Matthew Samuda, Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of National Security, and Dr. Horace Chang, the Minister of National Security. This has been a special Gleaner Editors Forum, The Crime Crisis 2. I'm Damian Mitchell. Thanks for watching.